Please give a startup grind welcome to Don Wright.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here, man. All right, start off. All right, very good. So how you doing? Is that on? Should be on. I'll give you mine.
I'm the tech guy.
That's all right. I thought they were really working.
There we go.
Very good. All right.
Got it.
So you've been traveling, right?
I've been traveling.
Just got from Cleveland.
I just got back from Cleveland.
Gotcha. And Italy, right? A couple weeks ago, right?
Italy.
Very cool.
Yeah, there's more interesting.
There's more interesting Cleveland. Gotcha.
Cleveland's good. It's not.
Well, before we get into, so we usually do these interviews, and we'll talk about the past a little bit, and Don as a kid and growing up, and just getting into entrepreneurship. Talk about some of the challenges of entrepreneurship, and then talk a little bit about future insights and things. But before we get into all that, we always love to hear about families, significant others, things like that. You have kids, right?
I have 3 kids.
All right. Gotcha.
27, 16, and 10.
Gotcha. And that girls, all girls, or?
Thank God, no.
Okay.
One daughter, 16.
Gotcha. Sounds good. Very cool.
Bad news.
Gotcha. So getting into that in the background, and talk about Don as a 10-year-old, 15-year-old. You know, what were you? Did you have any inklings of as you look back, entrepreneurship, startups, anything, business building? What were you like as a kid?
What was I like as a kid? Well, I grew up on the west side of Cincinnati. So part of my life was, living in Mayberry, and part of my life was running for my life from guys with switchblades and whatnot. No inkling whatsoever of starting companies or any of that. I grew up in a neighborhood where both of my grandparents lived on the same street. My great-grandparents lived in the same house as my grandparents. My uncle lived across the street. Everybody, had a blue-collar job and didn't even have a paper route. So, so no.
Yeah, that's
the answer to your question.
So, well, before we get too much in the background, I really I kind of glazed over Assurex, and even though you're not there anymore, we'll talk about what you're doing now. Maybe you could give people some context on Assurex, what it is, the brief history of the past year or two.
Does anybody know what Assurex is? A few people, that's good. So Assurex was a spin-out from Cincinnati Children's in Mayo Clinic. Fantastic technology that was dreadfully needed. Basically a simple cheek swab. Doctor rubs a Q-tip on the inside of your cheek. That is it was March. Sends it to our lab in Mason. Next day we return a report to the doctor telling him which medications will work and which ones won't work for the patient. So mostly originally antidepressants and antipsychotics, and then it was ADHD medications and opioid pain medications after that. Horrible problem, 500 million prescriptions a year. There's only 300 million people in the United States, so that's a big number. 60% of the time, medications don't work for the patient, not because the medications themselves don't work, but because they're not paired up properly with the patient. And what we did for the doctor is basically tell them which of those medications were not going to work for the patients, which ones were going to make the patient more sick, which is what normally happens to patients, unfortunately. It's a company that went from indeed a garage in a strip mall, which we were still in 4 years ago, to 500 employees, $100 million in revenue, and being sold for $420 million.
Gotcha.
And more importantly, just last week, helped their 500,000th patient. So 2011, we tested 1,009 patients for the year, something like that. We now test over 2,000 a day with the lab.
Did you say when it was launched?
The company was originally launched in 2006. Lasted about 8 months, went out of business. Sat idle until 2008 when the Cincy Tech guys decided that it was an asset they had access to still, and they called me and asked me if I was, well, Mike Venerable called me and said, do you know anybody who could help us build our informatics platform for a genetics company in Mason, Ohio? And that intrigued me because I didn't know that there was a genetics company in Mason, Ohio. Of course, there wasn't one yet. But come help us find somebody to do that is Startup Talk for. Come work for us for free, use your credit card to buy things, and don't do anything that we actually asked you to come and do. So I came there originally to evaluate the technology and help them find somebody to build the informatics platform, which I guess I did. But on the second day I was involved in the company, I was flying to Mayo Clinic to convince them not to take back their technology because nothing had been done with it. 3 weeks later, I was Googling how do you build a genetics lab, literally. There's a lot of good resources on the internet for that. It's not a lie, it's how we built our original lab. It's startup stuff.
So without, that's all right, I'll just be loud. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. I'll project. I use my outside voice. When you, what's that? Okay, gotcha. We're probably gonna kill the video.
I'm pretty loud, can you hear me?
Yeah. Very cool. So not having that any kind of, like you said, the paper route experiences or anything, in childhood or even maybe in growing up, what got you into entrepreneurship before you get into Assurex was Assurex it? Just talk about that journey.
So Assurex was the first one where I was a founder.
Okay.
I worked for what was the largest privately held software company in the United States for 12 years. I ran global product development for them. That does almost nothing for you in how to run a startup.
Yeah.
You learn how to run a business. You learn how to deal with boards of directors. You learn what balance sheets are and things like that. But working for $1 billion software company in no way teaches you that sometimes you have to drive to Cleveland, pick up a check for $20,000, call the president of PNC Bank on your way back and say, I'm stopping at your house to drop off the check so that you make payroll tomorrow, right? Because $1 billion companies don't do that.
Right.
So,
gotcha. So you talk about how the company formed really from, spin-off of Mayo. With some of those companies that spin off like that, they have a tendency to be, hey, we figured out the solution, or we figured out this cool algorithm, let's go see what we can sell this, But did it really start with the algorithm or the informatics, or did it start with the problem and, hey, let's go figure out how we solve this big problem?
So it's interesting. It's a spin out of two institutions, right? Cincinnati Children's, the largest pediatric research center in the world, and Mayo Clinic, that everybody knows who Mayo Clinic is.
Right.
And but independently, they had no idea the other was doing it. Both solved the same problem. It was the problem that I described before, right? People come in, they get on medications, they don't get better. And so both of them took kind of a slightly different, both algorithmic, but different path to the solution. And both algorithms worked. Neither was built in a way that could be used in the real world, of course, right?
Yeah.
It's one thing to build an algorithm, figure out how to use it, teach a couple of the doctors that work with you how to use it, and then use it in your practice. It's another thing to put it out in the real world and have people, try to use it. And so what we had to do was, one, figure out who the real customers really were for it, right? Our original business plan was completely wrong. We assumed academic centers would be more interested in it first because they believe in the genetics and they think it was cool new stuff. And we assumed psychiatrist under the age of 40, because it's genetics, it's new stuff, just heard about it in med school, they're going to be all jazzed about it. Psychiatrists under the age of 40 know for a fact that they can do anything themselves because they haven't yet figured out that they can't.
Gotcha.
And academic centers spend all of their time getting grant money, and you don't need grant money if you have a proven solution to a problem. You need grant money if you're trying to solve a problem. So what we found very quickly was that who wanted the product immediately were nurse practitioners who love their patients and take time with their patients and never go to sleep until their patients get better. Doctors over the age of 40, because they've spent a career now realizing that no matter what they do and everything they try, they can't get any better than 40% of their patients getting well on the first drugs that they give them. And that's not their fault, because just like you can't look at a person and see that they have high blood pressure or high cholesterol or that they have a heart condition, you can't look at somebody and see if they're a ultra-rapid metabolizer on one of the genes that metabolizes Prozac, right? So you can't possibly guess whether a patient is going to do well on Lexapro or Prozac first. And the community health centers that are just overwhelmed. Claremont County is responsible for Claremont County mental health clinics are responsible for about 50,000 patients. They have one full-time psychiatrist and a lot of other really great people who come over and help one day a week instead of being at their practice that they get paid to be at. No time to work with the patients, and no ability to follow up with them on a regular basis, so they needed tools to do this. And so these people immediately saw the need for the product. And we had to make it usable. So originally it was a blood draw. Psychiatrists don't do blood draws. Our original chief medical officer, who came from Mayo, I used to joke with him and ask him if he even knew where his medical bag was. He's a psychiatrist, right? They don't touch the patients. They certainly don't draw blood. So we developed the technology to do it with the cheek swab, which made it so that they could hand the kit to the patient and the patient do it themselves. It's all online, so 95% of our orders are placed through our portal. They put it in a FedEx, specially made FedEx envelope that we developed with FedEx. Over time, we became the largest user of FedEx services in the Midwest.
Oh, really?
The CFO of FedEx came to visit us to figure out what the heck was going on, which was fun. And we got next morning turnaround back to the doctors so they don't have to actually prescribe a medication and then because the next best genetic test that was a competitor of ours had 1 week turnaround. And so if you think about a patient that you just sent home, you've lost contact with that patient from a community healthcare center. You probably still call them back the next day and give them the prescription that they need. So it was all about finding the right customers and taking the technology and turning it into something that could be used in the real world, not in the Mayo Clinic.
Right. No, it definitely sounds like you guys had your target customer nailed, persona, that individual.
And then one other piece, one other thing I forgot about was making the report usable. So what we also found out was that nobody gets genetic training in medical school. Our chief medical officer wrote a paper on it. He surveyed a bunch of chief residents in medical school, and on average they get 1.3 hours of genetics in medical school. So in no way could our test be a genetic test that they had to interpret. So from a CLIA standpoint, from a legal standpoint, page 2, 3, 4, and 5 of our report is all of the genetic crap, right, that you're interested in if you're a geneticist. And page 1 is literally a green box, a yellow box, and a red box, or green, yellow, red box. And all of the drugs that we look at for that patient, we just move them around into the different boxes, and we tell the doctor, put them on something in the green box. Never put them on anything in the red box. And if for some reason you need to put them on something in the yellow box, read page 2, it's going to tell you what you need to do, right? Make it a lower dose, make it a bigger dose, whatever.
Yeah. Gotcha. What are some things you did early on to kind of vet out? Is this something that people, A, somebody's going to pay for, and B, is the person that we think is going to pay for in terms of identifying that target customer?
So we did a number of user studies, meaning doctor users, in a number of hospitals around the United States. Where first we did one at Mayo, which was really just kind of a beta test to see if you could deliver in a FedEx envelope to a lab and get the report back to them electronically.
Right.
And then Linder Center here did one for us, and West Virginia did one. A bunch of places where and we did surveys, both of the doctors and of the patients. It's really how we did that. Who was going to pay for it is a completely different problem, right? Because the payers are supposed to pay for it, and they don't.
Because they don't want to, right?
They don't want to. To this day, we still don't get paid for 70% of the tests that we run.
Gotcha. Is that something that you guys anticipated, or was it a surprise where you thought you would have more payer?
Something we knew. It's not something that our investors ever knew or appreciated.
Gotcha.
We are we're still the only test to this day that is for psychiatric care, genetic test, or any kind of lab test like that is paid for by Medicare. And that was a huge win for us, and probably is the reason that we got the exit that we got. And that was a 3-year process, including a flat-out no that we got from them, just a flat-out no. And we requested a legal challenge, which was our right, and that legal challenge is supposed to be allowed to be in person, and they said, we'll do it over the phone. And we said, no, we're coming down, and showed up at their office and weren't quite sure that we weren't going to be thrown out by security. And they gave us 40 minutes to present, and 2.5 hours later, they told us that they were so impressed that they were going to give us a positive decision.
That's awesome.
Which came 9 months later.
Yeah.
And then almost a year later, we got our pricing decision, because having a positive coverage decision without a pricing decision is pretty useless.
Sure.
And then we got them to retroactively do the pricing decision back a year, which was super helpful.
Gotcha.
So keep in mind, we went from getting zero from CMS to $2,000 per test, which was pretty major. We also, the same day they did a positive decision on us, they did a negative decision on every competitor. So no competitors in the United States get paid for their test anymore, which put most of them out of business in Taiwan.
Wow. Gotcha.
We bought some of their assets. But
Gotcha. So early days, what were your thoughts, as well as your, the co-founders and that early team? What were you thinking in terms of scale and size? Was it your target to get sold by, to get acquired by that much, or was it just kind of like, we're going to try this and see how much we can scale it?
So I'll be honest, I'm sure the investors, we had to present to the potential investors what we thought the value of the company would be. None of the founders, I don't think, spent a great deal of time thinking about how much we would sell the company for, what would happen. I mean, look, the reality is once you take VC money, you're for sale. Yeah. So you have to sell the company at some point, some way, whether that's an IPO or whatever, or the VC doesn't make any money.
Right.
So we knew that something would have to happen, but none of us were. We were too busy.
Right.
Yeah. You just don't think about it. Some people create companies because they want to sell them, and some people create companies. In our case, I'll say this now, and then I won't have an answer for one of your other questions later. But I started and worked in a company that I was fortunate enough to always be the founder, right? So our patient advocacy and patient interaction people knew how much I loved hearing the stories. We had patients come and talk to the whole company like every 5 weeks, so that everyone, whether you were a receptionist or an accountant or literally the scientist who created the new version of the test or a lab tech, got to hear from a person how the test changed their life. And people begged us to come do that. We had people beg us to do video testimonies and whatnot. One day, all the time, they would find me somewhere and say, we've got somebody on the phone we want you to talk to. And one morning, a woman had called in, and they patched me into the call, and they said, this is Don Wright, he's the founder, he'd love to hear what you just told us. And it was a mom, and she was crying, and she said that her 9-year-old daughter had been tested about 3 weeks earlier, and they had changed medication. They'd been trying to get her on the right medication since she was 5 or 6 years old. And that morning, she had heard her 9-year-old daughter laugh for the first time in her life.
Wow.
And so she was calling to tell us that. And that's what we were focused on.
Yeah.
It was really easy to get up every morning and go to work. It was really easy to stop any fight that was happening in a meeting and say, the internal thing that we constantly try to focus on is what is best for the patient. And it sounds corny, and new people would come in and they're like, well, yeah, we can make more money if we did it this way. What's right for the patient? Because whatever's right for the patient will eventually make us successful. It drove my decisions about what to do afterwards, and it was pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. So talk a little about scaling as you grew, which you guys obviously grew to 500 or so employees at one point in time. I've heard founders and CEOs, COOs talk about the transition from 25 or so employees to 50 to 100 employees, and the transition that you have to make in your role in your day-to-day life. Heard it described as going from water to steam, like this whole phase change of what you have to be and what you have to do on a daily basis that you may not have had the experience doing before in prior life. Talk about that transition.
Parts of it suck, right? It's great, of course, because it means that you're growing.
Yeah, right.
And honestly, it was nice. There's all kinds of nice parts about growing. I got to meet 500 fantastic people who were all dedicated to doing great things. I got to go up and talk to the governor and Jobs Ohio constantly about how fast we were growing. But really, all of that just all came back to we needed that many people because of how many patients we were taking care of, and so that was always really great. It's hard. It's hard to step back and let other people handle things that are super critical to making patients better.
Yeah.
So you got to hire really good people, and you got to trust them, and you got to make sure that they actually understand that you aren't kidding when you say whatever makes it better for the patient, that you actually do mean that. There's parts of it once you get over it that are really nice, because you can figure out ways to inject yourself into conversations where you don't have to be in the crap all day, and then you can walk in at the end of the day and say that decision's stupid because it's not good for the patient, or thank you all for making the great decision. Everybody go home.
Right.
Hopefully more of the latter.
Right.
But it's hard, and it was hard. We grew fast. We grew horribly slow at first.
How long was that? What was the slow growth look like versus when you kind of reached a tipping point?
So from me getting there to employee number 4 was 1 year.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Really slow.
Right.
For the next year, we were at 7 people most of that year, and then jumped up to about 17 within about a 3-month period. And then by the end of the next year, we were at 54.
That's quick.
And then that next 12-month period, though, we hired 200 people.
Wow.
So so we used to always say, it took us a year to hire 4 people, and then we were hiring like 4 people a minute.
Yeah.
Right. We had a day, like when we were still at about 70 people, we had a day where 25 people started.
Wow.
And so we staged them. We made some of them stay like at a hotel, and we trained the first 12 just on basic stuff.
Oh, that's
and then we
cool.
had them show the new other people like where the bathrooms were and stuff
Yeah.
while we got ready for them. And but it was it's hard, and it's hard to find good people that fast. I mean, there's plenty of good people, but it's hard to vet that many people that quickly. And I was still interviewing everyone who came into the company at that point.
Yeah, so talk about that. So another question I had was around, with it being such a people focused, not only the customer, and having that mantra of whatever's right for the patient, and what's in your DNA, and the culture being such an important factor and dynamic in a company, growing that fast. Talk about some of the challenges, not just about pipeline, but kind of the internal branding and internal engagement.
We said it when we were 7 people in the garage still, that by definition the culture will change, right? You can't go from 7 people to 70 people and not have some of the culture change. It's impossible. There's way more interactions. There's departments now. Everybody isn't in the same room. I was just telling somebody earlier today, actually one of our first board members was here. I was talking to him, and I said, we were all in a garage, literally all sitting at the same table. So there were no staff meetings, right? We didn't have to make announcements about what was going on. You couldn't help but know what was going on with the product, because you were literally in the same room. And I mean, sitting closer than we are right now. I remember then we moved to the campus you found us on, and then we were there for a while, and then all of a sudden we needed more space, and we were in the other building too. And I remember the first day I walked out of my office, and I needed my head of customer support for something, and I walked out to yell across the room to her, and she was in the other building, because we moved them over there.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, wow, now what am I going to do? I either have to walk over there or I have to call her, right? And so things have changed. Now we're a company, right?
Yeah, right.
But some of the hard things were, you go through that, and you can, you have to be diligent and purposeful about what your culture is, and make sure that they understand that, and that they want to be those people, and that you are bringing people into a company. It's easy when you're in customer service or patient advocacy to have the patient on your mind all day long. It's harder when you're in accounting or when you're in, whatever. But those people came into the company with a mission. I mean, I tell the story. I did a TED Talk about the technology. So if you really want to understand the technology, there's a TED Talk out there.
It's a good talk.
It's fascinating. Like 40 people from the company came to that TED Talk. And it was the first time that a lot of them had ever seen a public presentation about the company, because they saw us do it to them all the time. But they sat all throughout the theater. There were 600 people in the theater. And to a person, they all said, oh my God, every person around me, when you started throwing out those stats at the beginning, because it's 1 in 4 people who are on these medications, right? Every person you tell these stories to is either on one of these medications, because I even say I say this during the presentation. I say 100% of the people on stage. Well, I don't know about you, but when I'm on stage, 100% of the people in that TED Talk are on these medications, right? And 1 in 4, which means that every one of you knows somebody who's on one of these medications, and many of you are too. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that was part of the problem with trying to solve the problems in the first place, was the stigma around these things. You're born with these conditions. It's not a thing you caused to happen. And so people get that, and they come and they're interviewing to be a staff accountant. And they start in the interview crying because they're talking about their mom and how they haven't been able to get them on the right medication and that type of thing. So you can use that to keep the culture going. But what's really hard is if you're growing, well, first of all, just growing by 200 people when you're at 75 is hard. It just is.
Structurally,
there is no way to make that easy. Our 78th employee was an HR person, so it wasn't me anymore, right? And she would always laugh. She's like, right, because you didn't need an HR person before 79, right? Right. But certainly did for 80. But so just the mechanics of it are almost impossible. And eventually you have to stop interviewing everybody. So you've got to rely on other people to find the right people. But it's more than that. You have to, and it's more than just finding people who are passionate. You have to hire a CFO who
literally today can go talk to investors, but also still knows how to create a spreadsheet that has a budget in it, and when they don't have any staff to do that. But possibly 2 months from now, we'll have 10 people working for them, right? And so you have to constantly decide, am I hiring the woman who can run a 30-person department and is somewhat weak on this? Or, I mean, it's hard to find the people who can do all of that, right?
What did you prioritize in if there was anything, that...
We prioritize finding really good people and figuring it out, and being really honest with them about where we were as a company. So some of those people ended up working for something, some of those people came in as a VP of finance and we hired a CFO, and some of those people came in as a CFO and weren't a CFO 2 years later, and left amicably or took a different position in the company.
Sure.
Nice thing about growing that fast is you're creating departments on the fly.
Right.
So you can give people other things to do.
Right. So when you're, again, all those challenges, when you're in the thick of it, sometimes it seems, especially when you're in your startup and you're kind of early stage startup and you're in that growth stage, there's a lot of things that come up that seem like they're life or death to the business, and you're just cringing over these different decisions. And then, a year or so later, you look back and you realize that those weren't really all that big a deal. Any examples where you look back and see that you were...
There's a big one, but from and I'll tell that one in a second. But the short answer is most of them aren't.
Yeah.
Right. The trick is literally it's working your ass off, showing up every day, and from an entrepreneur standpoint, look, companies survive typically because of and get to the right place because of a single person. Typically, they put people around them who can do the things that they need to do. Steve Jobs is the reason that Apple was what Apple was.
Right.
And then they fired him, and then Apple tanked, and then they brought him back, and then Apple is what it is. And then Steve Jobs unfortunately passed away, and now Apple is not what it used to be anymore, and never will be. Right?
Yeah.
They are struggling to get the new version of the iPad out that has a better touchscreen technology.
Right.
I feel like people would just have been fired if Steve Jobs was still there. Right? What are you talking about? You got to go invent the next thing.
Right.
What are you doing? Microsoft wouldn't have existed without Bill Gates. I mean, the Rockefellers were the same way, right? I mean, it's all the way back in time.
Right.
Elon Musk is the reason that Tesla exists, right? And he needs the people around him to get that done. But those people drag companies and people kicking and screaming to where they need to go. And most of the time, when they're making those big decisions, at least half the people around them think they're crazy or think they cannot possibly get there, right? But you say things like, "We're gonna shoot people around the moon by the end of 2019,"
Right.
And you know what? If it happens in 2020, who cares? It happened, right? But 99% of the people in that company would have never made that. And I guarantee you, people passed out when he said that, right? People were like, "Oh my God, what is he talking about?" And then they all drank a beer and they said, "All right, well, let's go get another booster ready because we got to go figure out how to do this," right? And they'll do it, right? Because 5 years ago, none of them believed that they could launch a rocket and literally land it on a 20 by 20 platform in the middle of the ocean and use it again, right? And so it's single people who get those things done, and they don't worry about those issues for the most part. Now, sometimes they're billionaires, so they don't have to, right? But what you find out is the day-to-day crap is almost never as important as you think it is. I mean, I figured out, I used to have like this list of stuff that had to get done this week. And I'd show up on Monday, and already my admin would meet me at the back door, and she's like, the FBI's here, and this is happening, whatever, some disaster, right? The FDA wants you on the phone, and, Medicare saying they're not going to pay us anymore, and I'm like, cancel my, she's like, I already canceled your morning, whatever. And you get to Friday, and you pull that list out, and you got like one thing done on it, it was by accident, right? It was because somewhere in there it said, talk to the FDA about something. I'm like, well, I talked to them. It wasn't, whatever. While I had them on the phone, I said, oh, by the way, right? And those lists, like, you never come back to them because you make a new list for the next day. So those were like things that had to get done that week or the company was going to go out of business. Right? Still haven't looked at it. List was 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Company is at 120 million.
Right.
So they're not. They're just not.
Gotcha.
But a great example of a day that we thought was a really bad day when it happened was we had spent a year and a half trying to get funded, and we had a company in Michigan, a VC company in Michigan, and a VC company in Kentucky, who eventually decided to fund us, and we finished diligence and went through all the fighting over the legal documents, and literally on the morning that we were signing the documents, wiring the money, and having the celebration, they walked into the room and said they wanted to change the terms of the deal. And our board, which was good, said no, because what you're trying to do is basically steal the company. And with the new terms that you would have full control of the company, and you would never have to put the rest of the money in. And so we're just not going to do it. We believe in Don and Jim. We think the technology is going to be super exciting, and we're going to build this company, and we're just not going to do it. See you later. So that was great. Jim and I drove back to the office.
Quite quiet conversation. Quiet drive.
Yeah. Jim lived in Hilton Head, so he used to fly in on Sunday nights and fly out on Friday nights, and this was a Friday morning. We got back, and they said to us afterwards, they said, you guys have been nonstop trying to get this company funded for 18 months. Take a break. We'll start back up again at JP Morgan. We'll work on trying to find you some money in the meantime. JP Morgan was like 4 months away, and we got back, and I don't know that it was downtown. We drove back to Mason. It was a pretty quiet time. We got back. We were in the parking lot still because we couldn't go back into the garage and talk about this. So we sitting in the parking lot in his car. And he said, "So what do you think about waiting for JP Morgan?" And I said, "Well, we obviously can't do that. We're not going to wait 4 months to try to fund the company. We have people sitting in the garage who have to be paid, right?" And he said, "Well, good. I agree. I think we should go out to California starting on Monday and just start talking to people until we find somebody." And I said, "That's fine. Yes. Let's go Sunday night." And I said, "Okay, so good." I said, "So, have a good." He was leaving for the airport, and I said, "By the way, we made payroll last week. We had $1,087 in the checking account, which was cash. At the time, the company owed us combined about $500,000. In the end, they owed us about $1 million before we got funded, because we weren't drawing salaries and we weren't getting reimbursed for any of the trips to California.
Right.
So we had that cash, which is of course what you need to make payroll, right. For your employees. I said, "So we have $1,087. And he said, "Well, that's not good." I said, "It's not in any way good because I can't make payroll on $1,087. And my third mortgage, line of credit is filled up, and I'm not positive that American Express will not allow me to cash advance the next one, but I'm thinking it might be true since I owe $280,000 on my American Express card right now." And he said, "Okay. Well, I'm heading to the airport. Call my wife in an hour and a half and tell her to wire you $100,000. And I knew his wife well by this time. I said, "I'm happy to do that." I said, "But you're going to see her in 3.5 hours. And he said, "Right. Call her in an hour and a half while I'm on the plane. Tell her you need $100,000. Wire it immediately.
Right.
And whatever, you can't find me." Because she won't do it for me, but she'll do it for you. And she did, and we made payroll for a month or so, and then Cincy Tech came through, and Cincinnati Children's.
Gotcha.
And that was one of the work, and actually you can read this still if you can find it. This story is in the Enquirer story when we eventually got Sequoia to invest in our company. If you don't know, we're still the only company that's ever been invested in by Sequoia Capital in the state of Ohio. And if you don't know who Sequoia is, they're like the third largest VC company. They're one of the original VC companies. The founder of Sequoia is credited with coining the term venture capital. And so they did everything from Atari to Steve Jobs literally walked into their office in a pair of pajamas and pitched to them, and I got to see the room where he did it and all of that. And so when we got funded eventually, that story I just told is in the Enquirer story, but the truth is, and it's in that story too, is that the worst part of that story is that after all of that, I had to walk in and I had to tell the people in the garage, and then it got worse because I had to drive home and tell my wife, right? And it's just utterly deflating, right? To think we were that close, we were finally going to be able to do the things that we wanted to do with the company, and we were starting over from scratch and trying to fund this company, talking to all new VCs that we had never talked to before, because we're dried up in the Midwest now, right? So we're going out west. But that round would have been a down round. It would have been bad investors who would not have been strategically helpful to us. And 9 months later, Sequoia and Claremont decided to invest in us, and they never would have because they never would have had the opportunity to.
Sure.
So we would not have been successful if that had happened.
Gotcha.
So, so good things happen.
It probably felt like it was.
It was one of the worst days of my life. Certainly the worst day of Assurex's life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Wow. So I'm sure you get a lot of requests for advice, right? And folks ask you, what about this, what about that? And I'm sure that you've received a lot of advice throughout the way. I'd love to hear if you could share with us, of all the advisors, mentors, your mom, whomever has given you all kinds of advice, what's been the most challenging for you personally to actually execute or implement on that advice?
Well, by far, my mom's advice is to call her more often. And I failed horribly at that, like beyond words.
Gotcha.
But she's patient, so that's good. She's a mom. But horrible. If you're watching this ever, Mom.
Yeah. Sorry, Mom.
I acknowledge it.
Mine too.
I think there's a lot, but I do think something that I personally and a lot of entrepreneurs and startups have problems with is what is often referred to as the work-life balance. It is really easy in your head to justify, because you're never done, right? I mean, there's never a day, there was not until the end when I was cleaning out my office, there was not a single day in the first 8 years that I was there where I left for the day saying, oh good, I finished everything that I needed to get done, time to go home, right? So there were, 17 weeks in a row on the West Coast trying to get the company funded, never getting home before 8 o'clock at night, having my wife drive us to North Carolina so that I could work in the seat, and having later my now 10-year-old who, was whatever, 5, 6, 4 at the time, ask me every time we're going on vacation, are you gonna come down to the ocean this time, or are you gonna sit in the room working on your computer, right? When I started coaching, I coach soccer now, and I started coaching again a few years ago, and when I first told my son that I was going to be his coach, like I was his older brother's coach, the first thing he looked at me and he said, you do know you're not allowed to have your iPad out on the field, right? And I said, well, I'm not sure that's true, but I probably won't do it. Well, maybe my phone, but right. But that's sad, right? I mean, and I think about him. My older son works at the company still. He's a 27-year-old. My 10-year-old only knows me as Mr. Assurex, right? He was 10. I was there for 9 years. Yeah. So, which is great in some ways. I mean, when he tells me what he wants to do for a living, he's trying to decide between being a third-grade teacher or working at my company. So great. So great.
Both good options.
Right. Much better than his old answer, which was garbage man.
Okay.
His sister convinced him that it smells on the back of the truck, and he wouldn't want to do it anymore. But it's sad, right? Let's put it this way. I know, later you're probably going to ask me about families and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, I got divorced at the end of the Assurex run, right? I got divorced while we were exiting. And so obviously I did a shitty job of that,
Yeah.
right, of taking the advice. And it's really interesting. I was having a conversation about this with my psychiatrist recently, and it's fascinating that your mentors, and especially when your mentors are involved in the business, so they're on the board or they're a business partner, they will, to a person, and I've tried really hard to no longer do this to people myself, to a person, they will constantly tell you, you know, Todd, I am so worried about you. You look like you haven't gotten any sleep. You need to get home. Your wife is pissed, I know. She called my wife and, you know, whatever. You know, your kids aren't seeing you enough, whatever. You know, go home, take a week off, do whatever. And by the way, we need to be in San Francisco on Monday to talk to, you know, Sequoia. We're going to go out of business. Right. Literally without taking a breath. And they're not doing it because they're evil, right? They're doing it because they care about you, because they're the split personality that you are, right? And so it is really hard to devote yourself 100% to starting something and 100% to your family.
Yeah.
And you can't devote it, and it's not 50-50, because you've got to figure out a way to have more than 100% to make it happen, right? And it can be done. I have no doubt it can be done. I've seen people do it. One of the, you know, part of the new thing that I'm doing is devoted to, you know, the whole premise. It's not work-life balance, which is why I hesitated when I was about to say it. It's about having a great company and having a great life. Right. So it's not. It's more than just, okay, I'm 50-50, so I'm going to do an okay job here and I'm going to do an okay job here. It's not. It's you've got to be a family person, and you can make the company successful, and we're going to figure out how to do that. Gotcha. And that's the stuff that they always tell you to do, but nobody knows how to do it, right? So you fail.
Right. So my follow-up question to that would be, if you had something like, we'll talk about, you know, the fire and refinery, you know, eventually. But if you had something like that around today, do you feel like the circumstances would have been different? Was it kind of, I don't know, your personal issue like that?
No, but I think I've learned a lot, right? And I mean, I think I've learned a lot from that I can, look, I always say, wisdom doesn't mean that I'm smarter than you. It means that that you can take all of my fuck-ups and not do them yourself, right? So that's what wisdom is. And then you can, you know, at least create all your own screw-ups, and then your wisdom will be take mine and yours together and teach it to the next generation, right? So, you know, hopefully, both Tim and I and others who are can impart that wisdom on people, and hopefully do it in a way where we then don't say, by the way, we need you here tomorrow night for, you know, at 10 o'clock at night to do a whatever. You know, hopefully you learn from those things, right? I mean, everything in a startup is about, you know, learning about what you just screwed up, right? I mean, there's all kinds of studies about, you know, the smartest, best business people in the world only make better decisions than others, you know, 2% of the time, but they realize when it's a bad decision 10 times faster, and they have the courage to change it. Right?
Exactly. Yeah, gotcha.
And so, do it. If I could go back in time, I could save my marriage.
Yes, gotcha.
If I was starting a company now, I could do it in a way where my kids.
So now you know.
Yeah.
Now you know.
Yeah.
So talk about the acquisition a little bit, so we can get into that, and we'll wrap up. So I want to hear a question from you guys too. But talk about.
It's not a big downer. We're all happy.
Yeah, we're all good. It's all good. It's all good stuff. It's all good. It's real life.
Took the kids to Disney together. We're all happy.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. She's happy. She gets half my. You know.
That's great. That's great. So. Talk about just how the deal came together, the decision IPO versus acquisition, the timing, continuing to scale. I know that, at least I understand anyway, that the IPO market in 2016 may have played a factor into the decision to you know, go for an acquisition at that time. Just talk about that.
Yeah, really.
As well as the structure of the deal as well.
Right. Really, 15 and 16. We filed our S1 in January of 15.
Wow.
And we were ready to go. We had our bankers all set up. We had Goldman Sachs and Lyric and Baird and Blair, and we were doing mock earnings calls with their analysts, and we were My CFO and I were on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange working with their marketing people on the logistics of how to do the feeds back to all of our offices for the people who wouldn't be able to go to New York for the IPO on the day where the market did the 1,000-point crash in the first 5 minutes, which was unbelievably eerie. I mean, I can't truly imagine what it was like during the beginning of the Depression because none of the stops were in place. I mean, you just saw everything stop because the computer just turned off all trading, right? And everybody just stood there and stared at the board like, right? I mean, what does that even mean? That's got to be a mistake, right? I looked at Peter and I said, well, let's go get a drink because I don't think we're IPOing anytime soon, right? Our projected valuation for our IPO dropped by almost $300 million in a 4-month period, and so we didn't go. Which was fine. We had plenty of money. We weren't IPOing because we needed it. We had good investors. They were able to. They did a D prime round and put a little more money in, only because we didn't actually need it from a operations standpoint. But we knew at some point we would rev back up, and there's all kinds of SEC rules like you can't go public if you don't have at least a year of operating funds sitting in your bank at the time, and things like that, because you can't use the IPO to artificially allow you to operate, right? It's supposed to be for new growth, all those kind of rules. But we were living, it sucked. I mean, for 18 months, we were living like a public company without any of the value and good of being a public company. We were doing earnings calls with the analysts who were going to be our analysts later, so it didn't really matter that we weren't out. So they weren't doing anything that would affect our stock price, but they were already now having an opinion about us and whether we were able to hit our numbers, and so we had to make decisions like a public company, which was cool from an educational standpoint, but sucked from a business standpoint. It was also now you're living quarter to quarter when you didn't have to before. And then we got ready to go again. The markets loosened up a little bit, and then once you allow it to be known that you have filed your S1, because you don't have to do that anymore with the Jobs Act, then of course all kinds of people come sniffing around, right? Because people want to buy you before you go public, because it's too expensive to buy you after. And so we had good interest, people, companies like Quest and LabCorp, Myriad, of course, some others that probably nobody's ever heard of, and then Google and Microsoft came and talked to us because they were really interested in the data sets that we had. And in the end, the Myriad acquisition came down to a few of us sitting in a room and speaking from the heart about what we wanted to do with the future of the company. We could have kept going and IPO'd some other time. But it was time, and it was the right acquisition. I mean, Myriad had similar values in what they wanted to do. They had
not about the price, right?
Yeah, right. They had international reach. We felt like they were the quickest way. We weren't sure that obviously Google has lots of reach, but we weren't sure that they were going to do the kind of things that we wanted to do with the product.
With the data and with the information.
Exactly. And so we decided that the best way to get the most people the help that they needed, back to what's right for the patient, right? And it was a good deal, and we negotiated it, and actually got about twice as much as their initial offer with the earnouts.
Great.
It's good for the employees and good for us. And
I think it was like was it about half of it? Half of it was earnout.
We got half of it up front, half of it earnout, and all cash.
That's great. So that's cool. All right, last question, then I'm going to turn it over to you guys. So be thinking of your questions here. So what are a lot of the folks out here might be earlier stage or even just thinking about starting a company. What are some of the mistakes or oversights you see first-time founders make with raising funds? Terms, valuation.
So it's interesting. So first of all, if you've never done it before, get help from somebody who has. I mean, it's you can find people who can give you free advice about, about who you should be talking to and what your company probably is worth. There is probably no doubt that the company is not worth as much as you think. It's also worth more than what your first offer is going to be. Most VCs, certainly good ones that you want to be investors in your company, are more than happy to talk to you about that. The value to you versus the value to them of the initial pre on your deal is so much skewed towards helping you versus them that they're not going to be that afraid of giving you an extra $1 million in pre. They're just not. But it's going to mean a boatload to you and your option pool for your employees, right? So there is nothing wrong with going back to them and saying, I think my company's worth more and here's why. The reality is this, and especially early on, pre's are somewhat arbitrary, right? I mean, some VCs just kind of value everybody at $3 million and start there, right?
You look about that.
No revenue, why would you be worth any more than this, right? And so those kind of arguments can then be had, right? You're not worth $10 million because you think someday you're going to be able to sell this product to somebody, right? You have to actually have done it for them to give you those types of threes. And it's actually weird terms you can usually get out of there, and you want to get good advice. Have a good lawyer like David Wilbrand, right, from Thompson Hine, right? Have somebody who's actually done this before help you do it. Because some of that stuff will just get knocked out of the term sheet because they'll just say that's not, none of that is normal. We're not going to do it, and they'll let it go. They'll let it go. As long as the terms aren't bad, the pre isn't horrible. It's much more important what your next round is, because in your next round you will have probably created a product and have it in a few customers' hands or in a few beta customers' hands, and that's where you really want to fight about how much you're worth, right? Because that is when you will be negotiating both the value of your company for a lot more employees, and if they want to invest in your company and they want to keep you, they're going to make you whole anyway. So it makes no difference what the pre was on the original round, because they'll just give you more options to make up for it, or more founder shares. They'll just fix it, which is what Sequoia did for us. And so you want to find, money is important. You've got a business if you don't have money, right? I mean, it's just true. Don't take more than you need. I mean, some of you who are starting, don't take more than you need. It sounds great, they want to give you 10 million, you think you only need 3 to get some, take 5. I mean, you're way diluting yourself for no reason, and you don't need that much cash. And then when you go out later is when you start fighting for the bigger rounds. I mean, the biggest thing that Jim and I did, we got 11 and a half in the Sequoia round, and 11 months later we raised another 11. And the reason was we saw a lot of things happening, which actually did happen, around reimbursement disappearing for labs and things. And we knew, because we were already looking at our statistics, that we opened new sales territories and salespeople started paying for themselves at that point within like 8 months. So, and it wasn't a fluke. We knew it was working.
Yeah.
And so our thing was, we need to triple the size of our sales force, maybe quadruple it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you got to pay them for those first 8 months, right? So that's when you want to fight about, the bigger rounds, and you want to get the money you need to do the things you want to do. You don't want to take 10 million up front when you have no pre, and and
right.
you're just diluting your whole company and giving up half your company for 10 million. But find good people. There's good people who will help you, like me. I don't know if I'm a good person, but I'll help you. But I've done it before. But people, like I said, like David Wilbrand and some of the other people in town who, first of all, they'll just have a drink with you and help you. But hire him as your lawyer. Why would you not use David Wilbrand as your lawyer if you're in Cincinnati? Right.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I mean, and ultimately you want good money. So sometimes you have to take money because you need it. eventually you want strategic money. You want people who can help you with what you're doing. Even if that term sheet isn't quite as good as somebody, I mean, having Sequoia Capital as one of our investors was just unbelievably helpful. I mean, beyond belief. Like a month after they invested in us, they invited two of my guys and myself out, and they sat us in a room for a week and made every person that we wanted that they could control. So any of their portfolio companies and anybody who did business with them, come and talk to us in that conference room. Some just for like, you know, like this.
Yeah, right.
And some because we wanted to use their technology and wanted to make sure that we got the right people involved and whatever.
Yeah.
And they were happy to do it because Sequoia was asking, and then later I had to do that for other people. And so getting people who understand the business you're in, I mean, it was so unbelievably different to have people in the board meeting who would say things to us like, I don't care about this year's revenue, do what's right, because we can wait, you know, is a way different conversation.
Right.
And so you don't always have that luxury early on, but once you have any leverage whatsoever, go find good investors, don't go find money.
Gotcha. Right. That's helpful. Well, I'll shut up a little bit. I don't have a mic to go around, but just, oh yeah, that's it. Questions? Anyone? Sorry, no, I can get a mic. Oh yeah.
Hey Don, I'm kind of curious, that day in the parking lot, because maybe a lot of us have been there when the defeatist attitude or the defeatist starts to hit in on the soul. Did you have a little bit of that, or was it still persistence and grit just shining through and you had no doubts?
So it's funny, that question comes up a lot. I did one of these up in Columbus recently, and the first question out of the chute was, how many times did you decide to give up, and what made you keep coming back? And it's David Wilbrand. If you don't know David Wilbrand, go meet David Wilbrand someday. He and I were talking about this a couple of years ago, right before the exit. And you know, you can look at it like you were smart or like you were persistent, or you can look at it like you were just stupid. There's not a single day in the time that I was there, including that day, where the thought of giving up even crossed our mind. And I think that's part of the, so I'll say two things about that. So first I'll answer it that way, and then I'll come back to something else though. We knew we had a product that worked. We knew we had a need and a today we have tested 500,000 patients in North America, and we are at 4%. We've tested 4% of the available market for one of our three products, right? There's a huge number of people who need this product. So from a caring standpoint, there's a huge number of people who need this product. From a business standpoint, there's a shitload of people who need this product, and even though we're only getting paid for 30% of them, we're getting paid a lot for that 30%, right? So, I mean, the company will be over $100 million this year. It'll be a big chunk of Myriad's revenue. It'll be well over $100 million this year. So, there was no reason to give up, except that couldn't find anybody to bring damn money in the company at the time, right? So, you know, it's a weird thing. You know, people say, how do you keep, my mom does not understand at all. You know, how do you pay people when you don't have any revenue? Or how do you know, and I would always try to explain to people that, you know, it's all just force of will, right? You can't explain it unless you've done it. You can't explain the insanity of being an entrepreneur or a founder unless you've done it. And it's not saying, I mean, you'll all understand it if you do it, or any of you have done it, you do understand what I'm saying. But not a single day went by where we ever actively thought about shutting down. But also there was never a single day where any of us who were at the top, like, thought we were gonna succeed either, right? I mean, you just keep going, right? And you just kind of know, you don't actively think about it. I remember actually Josh from the Empire, when he came to interview us for that story after the Sequoia thing, when he walked in, he was like, "Oh man, you know, what's it feel like? You finally made it." And I was like, "Shut the fuck up. What are you talking about? We haven't made anything. What are you doing? We now have the right to go like build a business because we have some money, but you know." And then they came back like when we moved into the new space and they're like, "Oh, we've been coming since the garage and now you're here. What's it feel like to turn the corner?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about? Are you crazy? You know, every day there's something that's going to put us out of business, but we just keep going." You just can't think that way. Now, the other side of that is, and I think this is important, we live in the Midwest, and so we actually think that failure is bad, and sometimes a company not making it is not a personal failure on the part of the people who started the company. And a lot of the companies that have hung around for a long time around here have hung around for absolutely no reason. I mean, if you're 7 years in and you have no customers, you're not a company, unless you're a pharmaceutical company and go forever. And one day you decide whether you're successful or not. Those companies should have been killed a long time ago. And that doesn't mean that you're a bad entrepreneur, or you're bad at running a company, or that you had a bad idea. It could mean that bad luck happened. It could mean that you were too early. It could mean that you were too late. It could mean anything. I mean, I started a company called SAS Capital, and we were loaning money. We were the preferred lender. Salesforce.com was recommending us to all of the companies that were building products for their platform. And then this little thing called a global financial crisis happened, and banks that people had known for 150 years went out of business, and we went out of business. Well, that wasn't our fault. We failed. I mean, the company failed, but that wasn't our fault, you know. And the guy I started it with has restarted it. He's doing fantastic, and I started Assurex, and that's where we went. And thank God it happened, because he's doing great with a new model, and I started Assurex. But those companies need to be killed, and those people who are potentially brilliant, but had an idea that for some reason isn't a company right now, need to go work on one of these other companies that are going on, right? I mean, you can't there's no way that there's 300 startups in Cincinnati right now that are all gonna succeed. So at some point, some of them have to not succeed, and you need to move on to something else. And we don't do that very well in the Midwest, and I can tell you, so I've had that thesis for a long time that kind of entrepreneurs here don't get that, because failure is not something that we feel is okay, and the investors don't allow it for lots of reasons. Sometimes because they have state money and it looks bad in a portfolio if you have failures and whatever. And you know, and then one of my partners in my new venture has been working out on the West Coast for a while now, and he said, you know, it's not just that. He said, on the West Coast, if you're 2 years in, none of your employees would be staying around, because they move on to something else, because they'll realize that it's not a real company, right? So even though my answer is, in our case, we really did feel like we had something that was needed and was going to be a company, and we never once decided to give up. I think there's a lot of kind of false continuation that's going on right now everywhere, except for maybe 3 major places in the United States that do startups. It's not just a Cincinnati problem, it's an everywhere problem.
One question, yes, sir.
I'll shout it. So there's a long gap between when you knew you really had a product that worked, that really added value, and when you actually got investor money.
Yep.
What were the top 3, top 5? So you talked to a lot of investors that said no. Why? What were the big reasons that you got no?
Around 1,000 people we talked to. A number of things. One, we were in the Midwest, and that made no sense to the people outside of the Midwest. The Midwest investors, in many cases, weren't. It was fascinating to me. We talked to, so everybody in Ohio invested for the most part. You know, we had money from every angel fund, you know, Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati. We had Cincy Tech money. We had both technology and money out of like the pension funds and the discovery funds from Cincinnati Children's and from Mayo. So those people were investing, and they couldn't invest anymore, right? They've got rules and bylaws and all kinds of things, right? And then we went regionally, and we had these funds that had money from the third frontier that were in St. Louis and Michigan and other states and cities around here that were required to invest in Ohio companies because the fund of funds had put money into them, and they still had never made an Ohio investment, and they still wouldn't invest in us. And that, who knows, right? Who knows?
What would they say?
Nope.
What's the excuse?
Oh, you'll never get reimbursed, right? Which is fine. I mean, I will say that there were times where I sat in presentations with some of them who, I won Entrepreneur of the Year this past year, and I almost called them out from the stage, but I didn't do it. They're gutless. I mean, they aren't willing to see the value in these companies, and they cannot pick the right ones to invest with, so it's better to just hang on to their money and not do it. I will say that, if you think about the time frame, we were still coming out of that financial crisis too. So even by the time we started going out west, there were companies that called themselves, or VC companies that called themselves early venture, that were only investing in companies that had 10 million in revenue, which effectively just meant they were just saying no to everybody because they were holding all their funds for all their current portfolio companies because they knew they were going to need it. And so it was a mess of a time to try to fund a company. Nobody understood how you could do it here when you were on the coasts. I mean, we had a term sheet for a $20 million round from Kleiner 2 years before we did the Sequoia deal, but we had to move, was in the term sheet, and we didn't want to move. We felt like it was invented here. There was no, and the stupidity of, I pay $6 a square foot a year for my lab space in Mason, Ohio, right? I mean, they pay $300 a square foot a month for their office in Sequoia, and they have a private chef that comes in and makes them food. I can't do that, right? But we're not going to move. There was no reason to move. And I will tell you, we fought hard about that. When we went to Claremont Creek, which was the lead investor that brought Sequoia in, we thought we were done, and it was they called us up and asked us to come out and do the final pitch to the whole partnership, and I said, they called me, like at 8 o'clock at night on a Friday, and I said, of course, we'll go. I called Jim, and he said, yeah, we'll go. And I said, by the way, I just looked at the calendar. They want us to come Monday. Tuesday's Christmas Eve, which I didn't even think about when I said yes. My wife did, though, because we had 12 people staying at our house and like 40 people in town. I didn't understand the problem. I thought I was just making more room in the house for people. And it was her family anyway. That's why I'm divorced. If you ever get to see my history of the company presentation, she and Jim's wife are depicted as these cartoon characters that are always smiling, beautiful women with the blonde hair. And this is the only place in the presentation where she turns into this I hate Don character. And it's funny because to her, this was me going out to the West Coast after being out there 17 weeks in a row and getting 1,000 no's, and now I'm doing it the day before Christmas Eve, and we have 30 to 40 people in town. And we went out, we did the pitch, it went great. They asked a couple of questions, and then they had one final question, and the question was, how long would it take you to move the company to California? And I could see out of the corner of my eye, I could see Jim kind of slouch a little bit, and I don't know what my body language was, but whatever it was, his hand came over on my leg. And he started talking, and he told the same story we always tell. All the technology, for the most part, is coming out of the big land-grant universities. right? So it's coming out of the Ohio States and the Michigans, and these are our partners, and Mayo is in Minnesota, and Children's is here, and we're just partnering with the University of Toronto, nobody on the coasts, right? So there would be no reason from a research standpoint for us to move there, and I did the cost a fortune to build a lab there. It's crazy. Plus we're perfectly situated. You know, you can get FedEx from anywhere, all on time here, and all this stuff. And they said, okay, well that all makes sense from a business standpoint, but how are you going to find any? You know, you're really an informatics company. How are you going to find any informatics, computer science people in Cincinnati, Ohio? And I said, and Jim squeezed harder on my leg. And I said, because at first I thought they were kidding. I mean, or just dicking with me, right? I mean, you know, it's like, you do actually realize that there are people here, right? I mean, that we're not, you know, and again, I'm back, you know, it's like the West Coast ignorance, right? I mean, they just, reading their admin call and asked if they should fly into Columbus or Cleveland. And me, being like somebody who's been trying to save money for 5 years or whatever, thought, oh, wow, most expensive airport in the United States, maybe they're trying to send them to Cleveland. We would never fly into Cleveland. And then I realized they had no idea where we were. And I'm like, well, I don't know, get Google Maps out. Are you kidding me? We're in Cincinnati, Ohio. Fly here. How about that? But anyway, so I looked at it and they asked that. So finally I asked that question and I said, this is a true story. One of my finer moments. I'm sarcasm. I said, well, at night when we come in from the cornfields, and see, you guys laugh because you're from here. They didn't. They just said, yeah. I said, well, you know, we have these things in farm country called co-ops. And, you know, not co-ops like they have at universities and stuff, but, you know, co-ops. I mean, so we share combines and tractors and grain elevators and stuff because, you know, you can't afford to pay for those things by yourself. And I said, and you know, now that we have electricity and the internet, the co-ops have been nice enough to work with the local universities, and we have extension courses now. Where I said, as a matter of fact, I now have a degree in, you know, math and computer science, and they're like, wow. And I'm looking at them, and I'm like, you have to at least crack a smile, right? You have to know that I'm being sarcastic right now, that there are computer science people somewhere other than Silicon Valley, right? And then I got mad. So then I said, literally to them, and this, Jim just let go of my leg at this point because he knew just, no, stop. I mean, the other choice was for him to like stand up and knock me down or something, right? I said, are you fucking kidding me? Right? I said, we have the largest university in the United States 90 minutes from my front door. We have the 23rd largest university in the United States 20 minutes from my front door. I ran $1 billion software company from Morrow, Ohio, from my house in Morrow, Ohio. I think we can find a few computer science guys in town.
Nice.
And they said, thank you for your time. Jim and I got up and we walked out and he said, well, that went well. I said, well, now that that's over, I really have to focus on the next thing on my list, which is go buy a whole bunch of Christmas presents
There you go.
for my wife and take them back. So flew back. My wife's family had rented out Eddie Merlot's for Christmas Eve. Showed up in the parking lot, and Jim called me and said, hey, where are you? I said, walking in to get divorced. And he said, well, good news on that front. Claremont Creek just called and they're sending us a term sheet tonight. And so I walked in and 49 people came up and hugged me and said Merry Christmas, and my wife's at the bar drinking. And then I walked over to her and I said, well, we got a term sheet. And didn't bother to explain to her the problem that we had a term sheet, which means that you have to now go out and shop the term sheet and find people to invest in it, but that didn't matter on Christmas. Everything was good. And then later they introduced us to Sequoia. But, you know, that was a success, right? Some of the other meetings were just impossible. So once we were around the West Coast, I mean, just trying to find somebody who would even acknowledge that you could run a company here, and that they, you know, it's not, they don't want to come here. in some of the cases, they don't want to drive to Oakland, or they don't want to drive 5 exits down the highway. They want things they can see from where they are. And they can do that because they are who they are, right? But I did presentations to those people where I showed them, 3 years revenue growth, and they said, there's no way you're ever going to achieve that. I'm like, did you read the slide? I mean, that's the last 3 years. That's happened already, right? And you're like, well, we don't believe you're going to get reimbursed. I'm like, I'm getting reimbursed. What are you talking about? I've got $20 million in revenue at this point, and I'm trying to put together a C round. So, they had lots of reasons. Things are better now, right? I mean, think about when this was, right? This is 10 years ago. So, and we helped a little bit with that. We brought Sequoia out a bunch of times and brought the West Coast guys out and showed them that there was a city here and that, Children's did exist, and Cincy Tech actually had a lot of good things going on and all of that. So, that helped. So.
A couple more questions that we got to wrap. We're going long. Kevin, you have a question?
Wait, I'm talking and we went way long?
Since I neglected the interview.
Thanks for taking time to share your story. What's next for Don?
Thank you. So it's funny, when I was leaving Assurex, everybody would ask me that, and I had a really great answer because I was going to Italy on vacation. And I would just say I'm going to Italy, which I did, which was great. So I actually have an office in this building now, right upstairs. I can't talk about everything that we're doing right now because the SEC has really weird rules about when you're raising a fund. You can't talk about the fund. But I can talk about, so 2 things. I'm now a partner in a fund. We are raising that fund right now. We've made 2 investments so far. One of them was tweeted out by Cincy Tech actually earlier today. So that one's not a secret at this point, obviously, since it's been tweeted out. That's Doc Halo, which is a Cincinnati company. But I can talk a lot about my side. So besides being a venture partner in the fund, we have an affiliated company. So that's Refinery Ventures, and Tim Schiegel, who was the fund-to-fund manager at Centrifuge, and was also the founder of Share This, and used to work at Blue Chip as a partner, and with Dan Beldy, who, amongst many things that he did, flew F-18s off of aircraft carriers at one point in his life, which is, I think, really cool. But also recently, for a number of years, ran the North American part of Steamboat Ventures, which is Disney's venture fund on the West Coast. And so he moved here because his wife and his daughter decided to rescue thoroughbreds, and said, if we're gonna do that, it needs to be somewhere where there actually are thoroughbreds. So they moved to Kentucky, and he was moving here, and he found Tim, who he had known from a previous life, and they started a fund, and then they asked me to join. So that's the fund. The affiliated company is called FIRE, which is Founders in Residence, and that's the part that I'm running. And so the thesis for that is this. The region, because we're talking about the region, but really it's everywhere except a few places in the United States, is really not that optimized for creating startups. We've done a fantastic job here. This building is the epicenter of that in Cincinnati, and I can tell you, the last 2 days I was in Cleveland and Columbus, and they are so envious of us, they can't breathe, right? I mean, we are this mythical startup engine down here, which is fantastic, right? But the reality is, it's still really hard to start up a company, right? It's always going to be hard to start up a company, but the thing is, we have the second most angel investment by number of deals and dollars in the United States, behind California. And in the Great Lakes region, we have a grand total of 2 funds that are over $200 million and do A and B investing. So even today, if Jim and I were out trying to find people to do our B and our C round, we'd still have to go somewhere else to find that money. And it's a horrible waste of time to spend 3 years on the West Coast trying to get money, when people like Tim have been investing in those funds through the Centrifuge Fund for years now, and know all those people, and should be able to just do the introductions and make it happen, right? And so we don't have the enough of the funds. Cincy Tech is doing a fantastic job. There's others, there's Allos, but not enough of them. And what we don't have, and I've been saying this for a long time, I do a lot of traveling for Jobs Ohio and for the City of Mason, the City of Cincinnati, and the state of Ohio. Clusters build on top of themselves, right? Nobody decided to go build Silicon Valley, right? You had a few good exits, a few good things going on. You get some exits, people then create new companies, and it just keeps feeding on itself, right? MIT and Stanford both tell us that their tech transfer groups do the most good when they get out of the way. And that sounds great, but you can't just do that if you're at Ohio State or UC, because MIT has 47 VCs who have a satellite office sitting offer on their campus that are just walking around at the bars looking for things to invest in, right? Because great things have happened there before, right? So the universities in our region are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. They are producing fantastic graduates who are, and the workforce problem that supposedly we have here is not true. It's completely misconstrued. You can find people here, what you can't find are people who have grown a company from 0 to 10 million or 10 million to 100 million. And that's because there's only a few of us who have done it here or in any city in the United States, unless you're in certain places on the coasts, right? And so what we're going to do is create a national competition to bring people here, and especially people who graduated from UC or Ohio State or Case Western or wherever, and bring them here with their ideas and pair them up with the universities and start companies. And so that's what my part of the business is going to do. And so the idea is bring them here, fail fast or be successful fast, and then we have seed funding and A-series funding, for those companies. If it turns out that in 3 months, we're going to pay them to come. So if it turns out in 3 months that it turns out it's a science experiment and not a company, great, you've got another 9 months, go find another idea. Or, you know what? I was just talking to Mike Venerable yesterday, and he's got a great company that needs somebody to lead it. Walk down the hall and go do something there, because the whole idea is to bring more people into the region that have done it before, so that they can help all the rest of us get the companies going. So it's one small part of the proprietary deal flow that will happen in the refinery. The refinery is going to be a national, investment fund, but I'm excited about it because I get to work with lots of companies and get them started. So
sounds like it's needed. Well, last question. Take the last question, we'll wrap.
I read on your bio that
my bio's a lie.
that you are involved with BP's Center of Innovation.
Yep.
Yeah. What sort of things do you do there? Just curious.
Well, I'm on the advisory board, which means that I do everything advisory boards do. I help Rodney put together programs, and I oversee what they're doing, so we approve things. I also work with the school's administrative group to convince them that entrepreneurship is a real thing, because it's easy to convince them that science and math and everything else are. But I do a lot of mentoring too, and I help. We have the programs annually where we pair up with people who are trying to have their company ideas. The program is interesting because it's across all disciplines within the university. So there was a person who was in the music department, like studying cello or violin, and also wanted to be an entrepreneur. And there's people who, are computer science majors who have an idea for an app, and there's people who are in the business program, whatever. And so that's fun. I mean, we get to help them start companies, and then we get to do cool things like Shark Tank competitions and things like that. It's a super amazing program that he has put together there. They win international competitions constantly, or they'll go off and compete against 15 schools that you would think would just kick everybody's ass, and they come in second or first almost every day. They beat MIT in these things. So it's fantastic.
That's very cool. All right, well, that's probably well past time, so let's give Don another round of applause. There's a ton of pizza, I think, still left back there. I think, although people might have been coming through and grabbing something. More than likely, there's still pizza, still some drinks. Stick around. We'll be around for a little while. Don, you'll be around for a little while to chat. Really appreciate you guys being here. Next month, again, Jeff Burning with FC Cincinnati. That'll be a great chat as well. It's May 16th, and again, for the next week, there's the FC Cincy code. You get half off your ticket price. Hopefully to see you then. All right, thanks, guys.